Welcome to A Moment with Vivacious, a freedom ride where we the people gather to build ourselves, our family, our community, and our nation. For the sound of America for progress has reached critical mass. Understanding that we must put aside our differences to focus on the greater good. This is a place of collaboration to rebuild and restore our nation. Welcome to A Moment with Vivacious. Hello. I am so excited. Y'all know I stay excited. But we have a guest with us today, all the way from Arizona. Yeah, she's from Phoenix, but she is the master of men, let me say. And she's in here, and you know, the foundation of Vivacious Speaks is to build the nation and to build our people, to build ourselves, to build our families. I can't believe I came on here with glasses, but anyway, let me introduce you to Miss Rosalind Atkins.
Well, thank
Good,
you so much.
good evening. Good evening. How are you? I'm so excited about today. I called everybody I know who had a husband, a child, a grandmothers that's raising their sons. Some of us, we just trying to prepare. You know, I know some people preparing for a relationship. So I wanted us all to be in here so we can have something to grow on. How are you tonight? How are you tonight?
Well, I tell you, Miss Vivacious, your energy matches mine this evening. I am so humbled, as I always am, holding conversation for powerful Black men. I love Black men. And so to be in this space with you tonight and whoever our audience is, I say namaste. The divine in me greets the divine in everyone that's in this space and a part of this meaningful conversation this evening.
Well, I think this is a conversation, Rosalind, that we all need and we're waiting for because there's so much for us to understand. I think and I believe, and that's one reason I'm doing a documentary. On one of the documentaries that I'm doing, I believe that that our men have been cut short, not only by the world but by us. You know, so to have this conversation and to have a new understanding. Barbara, we thank you so much for being here. Thank you for joining us. And so I'm so glad that you're here, but we don't even know where to start. So where are you starting us? Where are you starting us?
Well, I would suggest talking about the numbers. If
Let's
uh, if in America we have 40 million uh, blacks, we have 40 million, and we call it blacks alone. If they're just black people that have no cut, no mixture, and they represent 12.1% of the total population, and we're talking about 332 million people. And these special black alone men, these black men, they're incarcerated at 5 times more than any population. They represent, how can it be that they represent 28.5% of the incarcerated population, but yet these amazing black men are in the 2.5%, 2.5 million black men are in the upper class, which means they're making more than 100,000 a year. And yet our black men find themselves in a position of target. So we say you're the smaller of the population, but you're the greater of the grind. And I'm so excited again to be a black woman that can say I can salute a black man because of all the atrocities against the black man. They have found the muscle and the tenacity to press through and yet rise. And so this conversation is a very meant conversation. It's a conversation to talk about how did moms nurture their men? Did they nurture them or did they coddle them and then we get them? So what do we do once we get them? But we all have the ability to acquire tools, you know, in your toolbox. So that's what we're here to talk about.
Yes, let's gather our tools. Let's gather our tools. I tell you, I'm excited about this conversation. And I have a friend, and I'm very flirtatious, but I got that from my dad. You know, he raised us. But I make sure that whenever I'm in the company of a black man, I tell him something good. But I don't have to make it up. You know, it's all there, but I'll make sure to tell him something good. So for those of us that have sons and men in our lives, where do we start? Where do we start by? And then I want to talk about this too, if we can, because some women are gonna say, I've heard this, and that's why I want to say it. We always talk about what they need, but what about us? But tonight is about them. That's the only reason, ladies. So let's can we start with, where do we start with building our men, strengthening them and encouraging them?
If I may say, Miss Vivacious, if I may say that one of the things I would like to extend an invitation to everyone in the space, be it male or female, but because we're talking to the male audience, I would extend to you as we have this conversation and the questions you may drop in the chat. I extend an invitation for you to trust the space. It's created just for you, and it's a safe place. Not because you know the people, but because you know the journey. You know where you've been, and you know that you can look at your brother, or you have chatted with your brother, and you have some very common territory that you've crossed when you're having your man talk, and when you're just kicking it with the boys. There's some things that you talk about, that you laugh about, that you cry about, but whatever it is, it's a common conversation. But in that conversation, you trust whoever you're telling it to. So tonight, I'm going to ask that you drop some very vulnerable. I want you to give yourself permission to be vulnerable, to be transparent, and to just trust the room, because we never get to where we're going unless we locate ourselves truly as to where we are. And so let's talk about um, Black men's trauma. We know that historically we can talk about post-traumatic slave syndrome. We can talk about what has happened to a Black man. And I do want to say this, that most people, I've had conversations with people who will say, well, we're not in those days. And Black men today are so contemporary. That was not their journey. But I want to offer to you epigenetics. What happened in our past is paid forward in our DNA. Um, I have, I'm a single mom, but I have a son. My husband passed, and my son's father um, played drums. He was always beating on stuff. My son was 4 months old when his father passed, and my son had this thing of tapping and beating on things. And most people would say, where did he get that from? How did he learn that beat? Because it's in his DNA. It's something that's paid passed forward. And so there are some behaviors that Black men have that's in their upline that trickle down to their downline. And they have these behaviors, and then they're shaped by their environment. And so they're a composite of all the things. And so hence we get here about who is the Black man that I have.
Okay, I hope your sound didn't go out. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
And I couldn't hear you, so it did go off.
So that's a very good point. And it's a point, I can remember, and I hate to bring up this part, but I can remember working in a jail. And the guys would, in spite of being in jail, there was so much fun and there was laughter. And they might jump around and skip, like make jokes, but they were so misunderstood and maybe afraid of by some of the officers till they were handled for being jubilant. And I'm like, wait a minute, So how misunderstood do you think, or what are we missing? Or how do we get into the point that we understand um our men, Rosalind, and the jubilance that they come with?
Well, I do want to say this. When we talk about incarceration, that's such a violent system.
Yes.
I do reentry work and I do a lot of carceral work. Um, and, that's one of the most emasculating, violent places. And when you think that a man is born to be a leader, he's born to be the priest of his household, to make decisions. And in that environment, they're literally raped of all the things God ordained them to be. They don't get to make decisions, so they lose their decision making practice. They don't get to be what men are very expressive. They're ticketed if they do what another man calls in that position of power. Um, they're talking back and they get a ticket, but it's what men do because they're androgen. We're estrogen and we're not so much. We're mouthy, but not challenging for our position. That's not the practice of a woman. It's different if a woman is saying, that's my man. That's a whole different thing. But I'm saying innately, what's in our DNA, we're soft, and we will not always challenge a thing in a way that a man will. It's more aggression with a man, but in incarceration they take that away. And so, as I was saying earlier, Black men are targets. They're incarcerated 5 times more than their white counterparts. And America has so normalized racism, and Black men live in that in the workplace. They live in that in just their basic travel. They are over surveilled, they're targeted, and then they come home to a Black woman who may not necessarily understand their Black man. And that's something we really need to talk about. um, the composite of a Black man not really having the expressive tools. In a toolbox you have a hammer, and you need to know when to hit that hammer. Everything doesn't require a hammer. A screw may take a drill, but they're just hammering on everything that needs to be nailed down. And that's the only tool you know to use, is to hammer. Well, sometimes it's not that. Like I said, sometimes it's a drill, and that's more of a strategy. A drill follows, you have to change the head to get the right fit. And women need to think about that when they're contending with their men. They need to know, what is the tool? It may not be hammering. I need to fasten this thing down, but we need to have a more um, open view, a more intention around our Black men, and be better caretakers for their mental disposition. I'm not talking about passivity, I'm talking about intentionality, wanting to lean in and invite our men into a conversation. They don't like talking. Men don't like a million questions, but it is worth a conversation with our men to say, if something transpires, um, what went on with that? Like, we assume we know, and we may know. But I think the more we don't know, or the less position we take that we do know, offering them an opportunity to unpack what's going on with them, that's when we get to create some tools for communication, because men are not the best communicators. It's not the thing they like doing. They say things like, you ask one question and you always ask, I already answered that. And that's what men need to know. If she's your woman, a million times to answer the same question should never be enough. The goal should be to establish understanding. Or you say, I said this, and a man will say, no, that's not what you said. That is not what you mean. And you can say, well, I didn't say that, but this is what I mean, knowing you said the first thing. But to turn a curve around conflict, you say, okay, I'm going to let him win this one because I know that's what I said. And I'm telling him this is what I said. But he's not holding the space to make it safe for his woman to say, this is what I said, or even this is what I mean. He gets into her head and he says, no, that's not what you said. And it just gets to be this contention rather than safety of expression. So then now no one wants to talk. And then it's a fight rather than communication. So we need to talk about that too. Men need to give safe space because they need to understand that women may be chattery, but they're they're excavators. They're really trying to get to the bottom of a small thing. For you, you might say, oh, it's so small. It's small for her, but it's huge that the understanding is there. No matter what the topic, it's so huge. And men need to hold that space for women. It's what they're made. They're made of estrogen. That's what it does.
Well, let me ask this question. And this might be like way out. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Do men sometimes find it easier to talk to an outside woman? He ends up be able to talk to the woman at work. Next thing, he's dating her and he's married, but he can't talk at home. What's happening at home or at work that's different from at work that he's able to get a relationship with that woman?
He's not invested in that other woman. He may be invested in terms of time, but he's committed to the woman at home. And that's a whole different level. Like sometimes commitment isn't fun and it doesn't have the pretty things. But if the two of them have not developed that level of communication, it's always easier because remember I say men are not necessarily communicators. That's really not their lane. But women are, and they almost demand it. And women and men, this thing about, I would like to talk about humility, because when you talk about humility in a Black man, it almost is as if they feel they're giving their power away. But humility with your woman or humility with the world, even, it's because it's a gift. If you locate yourself as a Black man and know who you are, no one can take your power. No one can bully you. No one can roll over what you're saying or doing because you're solid in who you are and you understand that the world is so ugly and you're not contributing to that. You're going to gift to that. Not give, you're the gift. And you show bearing your kindness. So humility is a big thing. And I was watching something that says, oh, Black men should never even use the word humility. And they should not think about it because they have been so ran over. But humility is a beautiful thing. And when you can be that at home, and humility, it does not mean whimpering down. It does not mean being silent.
Right.
Humility is an act of kindness. Humility is a gifting of who your heart really is. It's saying, you know what? I know no one has been kind to you. And I already see who you are, even in your aggression, your disregard, and your disrespect. I'm not going to permit you to be that to me, but I'm going to show up in my honorable self.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to gift you my kindness. We might have to go through something to get there, but ultimately that's my goal and we'll arrive because I'm not challenging who you are. I'm championing you. I'm the champion of who I am. And so I'm going to gift that to you.
So I wanna, if anybody's out there and you wanna write a comment or you wanna make a question or you wanna direct Miss Rosalind, this is the time to do it. While we have her here, I'm grateful. So I wanna talk about submission. And I wanna talk about a man that a woman would be readily submissive to? How do we get that man?
Mhm.
I understand first we have to understand submission, but how do we get to that point where that family is submissive to the leadership of that leader in the home? Can we get back to that?
Sure. And I absolutely believe that women women innately are nurturers. And because of that nurturer, sometimes there's a boundary breach. A woman may do too much in terms of securing peace in the home. And it doesn't have to even be a turbulent home, but women are made of that. So they want that. And what men don't understand, that if they show up in that humility, you're calling it submissive, but for a man, it would be just being humble. And if they show up in the strength of their own humility, remember, humility is showing up as your authentic, kind self. It's saying, I can serve you. The greatest act of, I mean, at church, they call it the ordinance of humility, when God bowed down and washed people's feet. It was the epitome of humility. And most people say, I'm not touching your feet. But God did that as an act and an expression of service and humility. And so when we understand what humility is, and when we understand who we are and how we locate ourselves in our truth, no one gets to identify or dictate who you are. But in your kindness, that's why it's called chemistry, because there's literally a chemical reaction when two people meet. It's chemical. You have the 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 oxytocin, the feel good dopamine when two people meet. Those things are exacerbated and elevated in sex and orgasms. You have this thing that happens. So it's really chemical. So when two people come together and it's chemistry, there is not a struggle to submit, and you don't even consider it submission. Relationships, the work is denying yourself and dying a bit that you can fit. So die a bit so you can fit. That's a real thing. So when you cannot be the aggressor, but you can be, there's a difference between aggression and being an initiator. And so aggression is not what we're looking for, but to be an initiator of a thing, the lead of a thing, the guide of a thing, all those things are so sexy to women. And that's why women, it's such a turn on. If men only knew the simplicity of flipping the switch on a woman, simple things, not just, honey, I thought of you, but in that moment, honey, I want you to win. Because this thing right here that we're contending with is not the biggest thing. The goal is to keep you in my life. And so, you know what? This fight, you win. But let's talk about it. But being the kind, humility is a win, it's a strength. And we need to understand that. So, submission, who wouldn't follow a man that understands what that is and what it takes to get it? What man doesn't want to be pleasured, that wasn't don't want to be pleased? Who is that person? Because a woman is innately built to be a nurturer, a pleaser. That's why some women stay in relationships far too long, because they have hope, they want it to work, they will endure it all just because they believe in their investment. And so men think, they miss that it's a gift, and they think it's a for granted, and they take this person for granted, and then they bleed when it's gone.
I am so sorry. We're missing this part. It was so good. It was so good. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Oh,
I'm
sorry, Miss Baleen, I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. This is like so real, so good to me. So when we get to the point, okay, we get to the point. I'm the type of person. Let me say, and when I'm in a relationship, I want to give it my all, but sometimes I hold back my all because I feel like, well, this guy or men don't know how. If I give my all to him and I just love him with everything I got, he's gonna think that I love him so much he could do me anything.
So,
How do we get through that?
so what I say to that, Miss Baleen,
Uh-huh.
we miss the beauty of authentic love when we have set boundaries to withhold ourselves. We cannot, and I encourage, especially Black love, I encourage people to trust the process. Like if you don't show up your full authentic self, how can you have the expectation for this person to show up their full authentic self? And we are only in control, and we struggle with the control of being in control of ourselves. So we certainly don't have the power to control anyone else. And many times you may be frauded in this thing called love. But if you show up your authentic self, dings come even in realness. So dings are going to come in what is not real. But I would hate for someone to miss that development. It's more difficult to withhold yourself than to trust who you are. And you should have some standards about what are deal breakers for you and where your standards are. So whatever that person does in the relationship, you've already said, hey, if this is a flag for me. And if this flag shows itself, this is where I'm going to draw the line right here. And that takes a discipline. It's an art to be able to say, you know what, I like you, but this right here, this is a no for me, rather than to say, I don't know if it's a go for me because I'm not going to show up my full self. I'm going to withhold some of me. I'm going to miss the beauty of what could be, and I'm going to deny them a full expression of who I am. Like, that's never going to be me. I'm not a risk taker, but I don't fear what other people are because the fraud and the loss is on them. I'm the gift. And I show up my full self. I'm single now, and I can't even tell you why. And it's because I have these real conversations with men. And sometimes men feel a little intimidated about straight conversation. And I'm not showing up to take your hand and say, let's go down the aisle. But I am showing up
Exactly.
saying, this is who I am. And this is definitely what I'm looking for. And you don't have to say you're this or you're not that. But I'm just giving you a little bit of the job description. And you can determine if you're going to be authentically you to fit it. And if not, you owe it to yourself. We shouldn't lie to ourselves. You owe it to
Exactly.
yourself to
Exactly.
tell the
Yes.
truth. And I just get to catch the overflow.
Most times, not let me not say most times, but often. And it's not always in a relationship because I don't meet people and want to be in a relationship. I never, like some people have, but that's not me. I'm just friendly to everybody. And I think I'm a lot open to men being my friend because my dad raised me, and I was with him all the time, crazy as he is. But most of the time, a lot of times, when I meet guys, young men and older men, and I'll say, "Well, who are you?" They tell me their name. Well, that's your name. That's not who you are. A lot of men, a large percentage of men, cannot discuss who they are.
No, that's a loaded question too. And again, remember, men are not innately communicators. And so maybe the question should be posed very differently. Um, you know what? Um, who are you? That may be a very loaded question. But you can say, you appear to be very interesting to me. Tell me something about yourself. What are some of those things that excite you, and what are some of your interests, or what of those things may be? But you have to be a little more descriptive than broad so that you can get the responses you're looking for. Because to say, who are you know, they may tell you what their profession is. And if you're spending time away from a workplace, certainly you're not necessarily asking about their profession, but unpack it for them and be okay with it. Doesn't mean they're adults because they don't have the answer to that. It may be in the language, because we have to remember that's really not men's jam to be all in the details, but it certainly is for women. Just like you say, who are you? Have you had a man ask you, who are you?
Yes, I have. Yes. And I can talk about me easily.
Oh, oh,
So,
for sure. Oh, for sure.
I love me. I'm all into me. So I
Yeah.
can I can go in for days. So you would have to shut me up. Um, you ask me who I am. You would have to ask me to be quiet after a while, or you can ask all the questions you want. I'm just open. Um,
Yeah.
and and I'm glad that I have a granddaughter that's just like that. I have a granddaughter that's a lot like me. I travel the world alone, um, not because I necessarily want to be alone. If somebody wanted to come, I'm sure if our personalities could be together for a couple of days, that would be good. But I love who I am. But I look at a nephew I helped raise. I'm so proud of the man that he's grown to be, and I look at some men. Let me contrast. Some women raise um, males, and you look at them and you say that's so wonderful, and some women raise males and you say, oh God, this boy is he's so weak. He's so he just like what is he gonna do to take care of himself? He looks for someone. We have Anthony Williams saying, maybe if you ask the man who let me put my glass on.
Who he is as a person, not just who he is, which could be
Oh,
considered a broad question. That's what I said. It
thank
is too broad.
Anthony. Thank you for your comment. So how let's if we can talk to some women that's raising males.
Hmm.
What are some of the things that we can give our sons?
Well, certainly let's stop telling our boys that they should not cry because they hurt, and it's
I'm sorry,
okay.
you went out for a minute, Rosalind. Can you come back?
Yes. I say we should start out by stopping the thing that moms do and that dads do too. Boy, stop crying. Boys don't cry. We could start there without, do not tell our boys that they shouldn't cry. Um, and then women them, and then they're emotionally unavailable. So moms and dads need to certainly give boys the permission to feel, to validate their feelings, to talk about their feelings, to pause in those moments of expression rather than saying don't do it. Ask them what are they feeling when that's happening for them. Their feelings are real and they're so little. They may not even know, but we want to acknowledge that they're going through a thing and that they're feeling it, and their feelings are very validated, and we need to be the full in their life to honor, whatever the expression is. If it's tears, they have a right to cry. If it's I'm feeling sad, that's a real emotion too. If it's anger, that's a feeling too. We don't should stop telling black boys to stop feeling what they feel, and then they suppress it and they go out into the world of oppression, and then they find themselves in depression. We need to stop it. So let's start there. Let's start with validating our little boy and giving them permission to feel. So when they get to us, they're emotionally available because they were taught their feelings mattered, and they now know how to express themselves, and they're not um, only expressing themselves with violent expressions or silent, not talking about it at all. But that's a learned behavior, and we need to give them permission to feel that. That's emotional fluency. And when they get in school and when they get in workplaces, they will know that the person they trusted most told them that they had a right to feel and express. And a person knows how to treat you by the way you show up and the way you educate them how to treat you. But if you're silent and withholding because you've been taught that at home, you will forever do it wherever you go. And when you do, it's an outburst. Let too much buildup happen. And now you're going to know who I am when I should have known who you were all along the journey. And now I'm catching some smoke that's not even mine. So let's start with validating our little boys' feelings and giving them permission to feel.
And Henrietta had said that we shouldn't hold back feelings. She was in agreement with you. And California Cutie says that she had three sons and she did not tell them to cry. Crying is not only for girls. But one of the emotions, Rosalind, if we could talk about, and that's anger. Because sometimes I feel like life has made a black man angry.
Oh, for sure.
And
Okay.
let's talk about that, can we?
Yeah. You know, in the workplace, you have structural racism. You have internalized racism where your little black boy may not even like himself because school has privileged Caucasians and they see their counterparts um, excelling, and they know that they were just as competitive or just as deserving. And that's why allowing them to express those emotions and entering into those conversations with these young black boys and letting them know, uh, validating them and acknowledging them and making space intentional. In my home, we had family meetings all the time. And my sister would say, you give your children too much permission to talk. She says, I'm not doing that with my kids. I'm the mom and I'm going to tell them. And I would tell her that's at her house. She can do that. But we would sit down and we would talk about things, and we would talk about there was an offense in the home, a sibling offended the other sibling. What should the punishment be? And they would make these massive things that should be the punishment. And I would tell them, remember, we have board meetings, we talk about these things, and that punishment will be yours. And it began to soften as to where my children learned to support, they learned to help each other, and they knew that they didn't want to inflict oppression and punishment. There's a difference between discipline and punishment. Punishment is irrelevant. We should not punish our children. It has nothing to do with what they did. Do something that's relevant, teaches. So, what is the thing that you can do with your child when they violate the family rules or what you told them to do? What's a relevant thing that will teach them a lesson, not just teach them that you're the mom and you spanked their butt and you meant not to do that? No, give them something very relevant so they can, that this is not what you do and why don't you do this? Like, we need to reason with our children. We are the parent. We do get to make the decision, but again, that's validating. That's saying you get to tell me now. The final decision is mine, but you to talk about what you did, why you did it, and I get to talk about what I'm going to do and why I'm going to do it. It creates health. We have mental health that's at an exacerbated rate because we didn't have the tools when we were raising our children. And then right now, Black men are the least that seeks mental health. And I would say that Black men, being the target that they are, seeing the exacerbated insults and atrocities, need it more than anyone. And they should have access to it, and they should have it.
Can we put Anthony Williams' comment up, back up, please? Anthony Williams said, going back to crying. And I want to entertain him because he's a man. Okay? Anthony
I'm sorry, you
Williams said,
want to entertain him because I'm sorry you went out.
he's a male, and this is
Okay,
about males. So I'm
sure.
going to entertain what he's saying. I think it is more about making sure the child, it's about going back to crying. I
Hmm.
um I think it's more about making sure the child isn't crying unnecessarily instead of effectively confronting their issue and not wallowing in their feelings. I was encouraged to cry when it was warranted.
Right. So we never want to pacify, we want to parent. So if you have a crying child that's just whining because they're whining, that's still worth teaching that that's not what crying is different from whining. We know when our child is whining. I was addressing if your child has hurt, you can visibly see they hurt themselves, they're whining, they're crying, or internally you cannot see an emotional um, crisis for them and they're crying. We want to still honor that. Whining child,
Yes.
you can still say, why are you whining? You still want to know, and then say, whining is not something we do in this house. We use our words. That's manipulation, son, daughter. That's manipulation, and it's not. We get to give them a language. We get to ask them to use their language. And we don't get to, as I think he used the word, we don't stay in the whining state with them. No, we don't let our children whine, but we still do need to acknowledge. We don't have to validate whining, but we acknowledge, we hear you. We still, it's a teaching moment. We don't accept whining, and this is why. No one hears you when you're whining. It is not a language, and I need you to use your words. I didn't let much that my children did. I didn't disacknowledge. I didn't act like I didn't see it or wanted them to learn from that.
Very good point, Henrietta Sani. We have had encounters with so many men, and the very things we don't like in them, we are still not able to shape our sons against this very behavior that we don't like.
What is the thing?
She's saying that we have encounters with some. Can we put up Henrietta's again? I want Anthony to come back though. Hold Anthony for a second. We have had encounters with so many men, and the very things we don't like in them, we are not able to shape our sons against those things. The very behaviors we don't like.
She's saying that there's a conflict with behaviors in our sons and the things that we don't like, we're not those things in them.
The things that we see in maybe our dads. This is what I'm understanding. If I'm wrong, Henrietta, correct me. And we may see these things in our dads or in their fathers and our brothers, things that come up in our culture that we just don't like. And then as much as we try to raise these things, and I'm assuming they're negative things that we see and we don't like, and we try to raise our sons so that they don't pick up these negative things, our sons still end up with those very behaviors we try to avoid in them.
And what I would suggest is it's it's very biblical to say, by beholding we become. So what they see, they become. And so they don't just pick it up. And we have to remember, in the DNA, let's not forget what's paid forward in the, so to disrupt the behavior, they get it from somewhere. And so it's either they get it biologically or they get it environmentally. So that's why it was so important, and it still is. I do reentry work, and it still is important for me, the behaviors that I see, and be very intentional about having conversations about those things, take them to the places to see the consequences of those things, and also take them to the places to see the successes of doing something different. It takes work. It's conversation, and that's why it takes a village. It takes a real village. Our boys need to be invested in more than just home and school. And it doesn't have to be sports, but boys need to be involved in community engagement. They need to be involved to serve others beyond themselves. They need to be involved in helping. It was a rescue for me, getting my boys out to help do things other than just what I required them to do, but to see the world and see what the world was in them. And I involved them in those places. So it's no condemnation to mom or dad that their children become. But just in this moment, I'm making the suggestion that children need to be community engaged. They need to be engaged in church work, civic it is, something other than. And it's not just to consume their time, something that they have a passion about, something that they're interested in, and something that speaks to the behavior that you don't like.
Anthony Williams said, thank you so much for addressing that, because it happens so much. You know, I've heard so many women say, I don't want you to be like your daddy, but you live with your daddy every day. You know, you are your daddy. And
Yes.
and I think some of that was what Henrietta was trying to say. And thanks for addressing that, because I think more of us um deal with that, then well, how is he turning out to be the very thing that, you know, I tell him about every day. Anthony says also the individualism of the modern adults keep kids from gaining outside information. I learned a lot of life lessons from people who weren't my family. Assessment and discipline are paramount. And that's good, but I want to say I think that this day we leave our children to the internet, and the village has disappeared. You know, they had the park, where there was a man in the park leading the park. A man that you could trust with your children, that you knew were going to be teaching them something. Everybody that went to that park with Jerome came back strong. You know, they came back males. So we need some males. This is my opinion. We need some males that will stand up like Jerome stood up when we were raising our children, that we had a park to send them to. Rosalind, you want to address that?
Yes. You know, I never allowed my children electronics. And with the television, it was a no go in my home too. There again, I'm real big on what science says, because we're a believer in science, and a brain response to technology. And every household has some form of it in their home. But it was something I guarded my children against. And if they were on this, if they were on this line here, they would tell you that they thought they were being. But you know what? I knew what kept me healthy as a child, and I wanted my children to have to know what it is to dig in the dirt, what it is to push each other in a swing at a park. We have to create health for our children. We have to create mental health for our children. Hey, all this stuff is cool. I would not this day and time, I would not dare let my child um, have a gaming system in the home. I would not. I have done a whole study on that. I just, it's so damaging what it an undeveloped brain, and we wonder why our children don't listen. It's kind of like our frontal lobe is where we make decisions, and that type of technology disrupts that frontal lobe. And when children, you ask them, why did you do that? And they say, I don't know. They really don't know because their brain is scrambled, playing so many games, watching so much stuff, chasing whoever on these little electronic handheld on your phone, these games and the things that they're watching on television. They have such a scramble of artificial entertainment that they don't know what it is to be grounded in a solid world, to do some simple stuff. And parents can't wait to get their child the latest of anything, and none of it is good for our children. And so when we start looking for help where we can pause our children, and we think it is a hard thing to tell our child, parents did not find it difficult, so I didn't find it difficult. If so and so got such and such, and if it did not contribute to the wellness of my child, they
I
learned,
want you to
they
go
worked
back
that
to
muscle out.
Henrietta,
That muscle was strengthened by saying no
please.
and telling the reason no. It's okay for your child at the cost of being better. Brilliant brains, brilliant babies call for bold parents to say no.
One of your children is here, Von Bros. You know, they come under different names. This I'm here, and I do remember no video games, laugh out loud. But I do remember all of those encyclopedias. Well, that's a good thing. And Henrietta asked the question, can we get Henrietta back? I wanna Nola. Nola. Okay. I think that Henrietta was asking the question, how can we, whether it came genetically or whether it came environmentally, how do we shape our sons? How can we form them to be good men? What are some of the things that we can give our sons to be good men?
If you're in a two-parent home, regardless, in spite of how your husband behaved, you have a duty to have a certain representation for your son. Because one thing about this is, I think you mentioned that someone said there, I don't know if I understood you to say someone had a male in the household or a father in the home and didn't want their child to be like that, but that's exactly what they became. When when a child see, they can see good and they can see not so good, but if they see more good, they lean to that. That's the natural law of a scale. Whatever is heaviest weighs the most. And so in this whole, if you're fighting for the lens and the heart of your son, if you're fighting for what he sees, there's always a cover. It's kind of like the person, the worker that comes to your home. This is just an example, a placeholder for the conversation. The person that comes to your, we have these surprise stories where they say, I thought that was the perfect family. I would have never imagined that was going on in the home, because there was a representation, there was a certain look. And that same thing can go in the home when one parent is they should be doing and the other parent can do that. It requires more muscle, it requires more energy, and it requires an intentional point out, not your daddy is a loser, your daddy is no good, but let's talk about how you feel about what dad, okay, because you have to call that thing.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't know. Roz got dropped. I am so sorry, but and we're a little short on time. Wait, she's coming back. She's coming back. Hello?
Yes.
I'm sorry you got dropped. I'm glad you came back. I'm so happy.
That's okay. So if you
Mhm.
can name the thing, if you can name the thing to your child without condemning dad, but condemn the behavior and say, this thing is happening in our home. Mom knows it's happening. Mom does not like that it's happening. And let's talk about what these other choices are. We can't put dad out, and that's not what we're talking about. But what I'm saying is, because we don't delineate, because we don't call a thing out and identify, and we just let it go because we think it has to in our home, it could be a dinner away from home and talk to a child that know what it is to be reasonable. This child is mature enough to understand your conversation because he's going to see that in the home because dad is in the home. But mom does have a platform to hold those conversations when they're young. They're not a tree trunk yet, they're a twig, and you still have the opportunity to bend them. And a lot of burden falls on mom to do the work. It has to be an intentionality, and get some outside help. Get someone else that this boy can see something different. And a lot that they see different is if you're going um, to military spaces where you can see men working out and men running and men giving orders and men rising, and this is how you get another rank. You do these things. So I did that with my son. Project Challenge is what I used. So I'm telling you, when it was not right at home, I was desperate to not have that kind of thing in my home. And I didn't just let it sit dormant and say, oh, well, this is where we are and this is what my son is going to see. No. And guess what? My sons, I have a deceased son, but my remaining son is so tender toward children, love children, and the best father ever. Like I'm telling you, I didn't let it happen in my home. And I am a witness that my husband was not the representation he needed to be, but my boys did not turn out to be who he is either. A witness.
I think that military thing, because a lot of, a large amount of boys don't have a dad in the home. That military thing and watching men work,
Yep.
that sounds really really good. So how do we find some? I know when we were coming up in New Orleans, it was my cousin who had said that. I don't want to be calling out, my family, without their permission. They're not here. I don't want to talk about their lives. But Nola, if you can hear me, would you please put up Henrietta's question so that I can read it again? But okay, let me read it. I'm saying this is in regards to how can we shape our sons to be responsible men.
Giving them duty in the home. As a woman, we know what we would like to have, and we know what we do or do not have in the man that we may or may not have. We know the qualities that we want our sons to be. And I can't say this word enough. It takes work. You have to be invested in that. You have to be invested in these intentional conversations about what does your sons think about as they're growing up from little bitty boys. Little boys want to hit. They will play with their toys, and if you want to take their toys, it's a hit. And most moms will say, boy, don't do that. Boys don't hit girls. Well, girls don't hit boys either. So it needs to be an intentional conversation when they're little. You know why we don't hit? Not why we don't hit girls. Do you know why we don't hit? There's so many teaching moments that we let get past that are build upons. If they get this one lesson, they will get the next lesson. But somehow we have very whatever a person's parenting style is, we have to get to this place where we're in the fight for our sons' lives. We're in the very fight for their lives, and the things that we don't want to be their character or their disposition is the very thing we have to be intentional about. Like, are you being tender toward your son, and are you just not saying, boy, go take out the trash? Say, you know what, one day you'll get a wife, and one of the things she's going to want you to do is take out the trash.
That's
Or
right.
one day you're going to have a dorm partner, and he's not going to like you having trash all over. So I need you to take the trash out. It's always in the language. There's a reason we're doing this, not take out the trash because I said it. And you want them to be attentive. Son, did you see the trash running over? Let's talk about why you saw it, and I'm having to tell you to take it out. It's very fair. Maybe you just didn't want to, but let's talk about why you didn't want to. It takes a lot, but you have to walk it back and put in what you want that boy to get out of it, and he becomes it. You have to put it in little bitty boys. If they're making a mess with toys, I need you to help mom. Because you know what they call people that clean up after people all the time? They call them maids. And I'm your mom, son. Don't you want me to be your mom? Okay, well, I need you to pick that up, and I need it to be a practice. So tomorrow, and not giving them money for picking it up, because it should be a practice. You want that to be innate. Building character is not something you reward. It's something you expect. Because if you pay them to do it, it's not necessarily a value. It's a job, and they are getting paid for it. So we need to think about why we do what we do and how we do those things. But every little thing is a teaching moment for your boys to become good men. Teach them. When you're walking, hold your son's hand and tell them. Most women want you to hold their hands and, son, I'm so glad you're my strong son. You keep me safe and protected. Like, talk to them about all the things. I did it with my boys. And I have a boy who will kiss you, kiss us all the time. And I have a daughter who hates it. And my son knows she hates it. And so he kisses her because, you know what? He learned at home. We can teach our boys to be what we want them to be. There's a way.
I want to talk about, if I can, I know we're running out of time. I think we're really out of time. So, but this is very important to me. I want to talk about how even grown men um, can learn to handle the anger. I worked with a guy, and this guy, he kept telling everybody how he felt. And I felt like he was disrespected, and they thought they were going to handle him because he needed a job. And one day he said, "Oh, yeah? Okay. I've already told you too many times." He didn't say this, but this was his action was to me. And I was so proud of him when he quit that job, because it was like, this job is not going to make me, and I'm not going to allow this disrespect. But he didn't lose who he was in the process of it. And he'll always be my hero for that. But then there was an incident where this man, because his in his mind position um was challenged by another man, and he just wanted to kill the man. How, and I can understand. I understand. I'm a civil rights girl. I understand what our men have gone through, but how do we handle, not we, because it's them. It's a whole lot that we can talk about, but we don't understand. God didn't give us all what He gave you, so we don't understand the anger of a black man. But how do we deal? And how do he learn to deal with his anger?
Well, there's so many levels to rage, but black rage is a real thing with black men. And we really need to hold a space for them. with that rage because it's real and they have many reasons to be. It's very valid. But it goes back to that piece and something that you shared about the man. The initial man didn't feel heard. He didn't feel heard. I think I heard you say that. So
Mm-hmm.
we do have to listen and we do have to validate. We do have to acknowledge that we hear you. May not be able to grant you your request, but hold some respectful space to listen and to give it back to you. I heard this right here. And we have to hold that space. And then, like I say, there's levels to rage. Black men are angry for so many reasons. And I'm angry with and for Black men. I'm angry with them because I see what the world is doing to Black men. I live in Phoenix, Arizona. Phoenix, Arizona is the number one incarcerating county in the nation. And we only, Black folk only represent, they say 6%, but it's really about maybe 5%. We represent 5% Black, but we represent 18% to 23% of incarceration. It's the number one county for removing Black babies. It's the fourth deadliest police force. It is nothing white, nothing Black around here. You gotta use a magnifying glass to find us. And so when I look at Black men in Phoenix, Arizona, I know that they're over surveilled. It's the number one city of $1 million blocks. And if you don't know what $1 million block is, it's where they get $1 million per 10 blocks for incarcerating Black folk. And so if you can live like this and
Oh shoot. I don't know when. This is so important. I am so sorry to the
for me,
guests. Can you I'm so sorry we didn't hear it, and this is so important. We left out where they're all being incarcerated.
yes, and so we have this massive incarceration here. We actually we are the most incarcerating county in the nation for Black and brown bodies. And if we only percent Black, why are we representing 8% in the prisons? Like, insane. And if Black babies only represent 5%, why are they representing 8% in child removal? Like, where are Black babies? So you think a Black man is, if his baby has been removed out of his home for something very insignificant, you think a Black man isn't enraged when he's being stopped and when he's moving around in a county that's over surveilled, where the state is making millions of dollars of just locking them up? Yes, a Black man is enraged. And then when he comes, beautiful wife, she doesn't understand because she has her own tender spot that she's holding just for him to feel. And he can't because he's in a workplace that has this institutionalized racism where they have structured it, normalized it, and he's beat down there. So when the job that has beat him down, the streets are beating him down because there's an officer that's pulling him over, waiting to pull him over. And then he gets home to her, and she's like, her day has been what it is. She needs him. And we as women, we need to really pause, not talk, but pause and understand, why is my man like this? And make space for him to talk about where this rage is. Put it in a container and say, you know what, we need to unpack this thing because I'm on your team and I'm getting something from you that neither I don't deserve it, I don't want it, but I want you. And we need to pause and unpack that thing and really lean in, because we're going to be the therapist for our men, because they don't have enough Black therapists that look like us, and Black men are not signing up for therapy. They're not going in for that. And so if we already know the world is doing this to our Black men, we need to raise us differently. And that's saying that in order to raise our Black boys different, I think someone asked that, the quickest way to really get a Black boy to where they need to be is, it's kind of like to learn a new language. We go and we immerse ourselves in an environment where that language is spoken. So We need to immerse our boys in a home where the language of love and structure and accountability is spoken. We need to have a world where our men can hear, as is and whatever the world does to our men. We need to be the heroes of this situation because we are already armed with knowledge, what's happening, and knowledge is power. We need to seek out answers for our individual men, hold those conversations with them. I just completed, it was a 4-week series of, it was called the Compassion Project. It was a 4-week series with for Black men, and the subjects were validation, humility, compassion, forgiveness, and their spirituality. 5 weeks. And when I said it was the end, we're not ready to end. And it went so well that the university here had me to duplicate it. We and some other colleagues, we duplicated it at ASU, um, at their mental health um, forum for Black men. But the point I was getting to, wanted to stop. So one of the brothers stood up and said, I will take the responsibility to continue this. I met with those brothers Monday night. They want to, I thought maybe they would want to do it once a month. No, they're going to do it every week, every Monday night. Every other week, they want a facilitator,
That's
but for
awesome.
2 weeks, they want to talk about their own issues. And their issue this week is the relationship they had with their mother. Was it nurturing or was it coddling? And why are they where they are with their women today? It was a powerful conversation, but men are talking. And so women make space for Black men because they are our heroes. They really
Yes,
are.
they are. Yes, they are. It has been so wonderful. I'm going to stay in contact with you because I'm sure we have way more comments than we were able to read, and we'll have some more. So we may have to have you back because like we run out of time, we run over time. And I don't want, I'm like those men, I don't want to hang up. I have so much that more I want to talk about, but thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate you. And I'm sure our guests appreciate you. And I'm going to talk to you soon. I'll talk to you soon. So you want to leave us with anything?
No, just know that what I say is I'm really humbled to be in this space with you. And we have the answers to the crisis for our Black men and our Black boys. It's just intentionality. Let them know I see you and I want to be all that you need me to be to support you through this journey. And we do have answers for it. And so reach out outside of yourself. There's organizations that will support you with your little Black boys, but it takes a lot of muscle because remember, we're estrogen, we're tender, and they're androgen. They're tough, but we can lean in and we can help craft our little Black boys to become the great men we want them to be, and the men that mothers missed, giving them the tools they need, we can assist that too. So let's do it. It takes a village, and the fight is fixed. We win.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you, audience, for being here. I'm even
Yes.
more excited than I was when we started out. I'm going to talk to you soon.
Bye bye.
Thank you.